The Federal Reserve, which we cover extensively here on the show, not only manipulates our currency and engages in risky economic behavior, but it creates something that we call bubbles. Bubbles that wreak havoc on our economy and the global economy as well. In the past 30 years alone, we've seen the Fed's risky agenda behind the savings and loan crisis in the 80s, the tech bubble in the 90s, and the more recent mortgage meltdown. This pattern never ceases. So what's next? Don't be fooled. These bubbles are created. They don't just happen by mistake. Now that the world economy is globalized and the dollar is devalued, with foreign countries investing in gold, is America as a country the next bubble that's about to burst? Here with the answers is David Bruckner, adjunct professor of organizational leadership at Columbia University. David, it's a pleasure.
Good to see you.
Thank you. What is a bubble?
It's
in economic terms.
No, in a simple economic term, it's the concept where people, the irrational exuberance where people will buy more than it may actually be worth, thinking it's always going to be bid higher. Right. So we create this irrational feeling that the prices are going to go up. So buy now. Right now, one might say we have a bubble in gold. It's not true, because the valuation of gold is not something that is just speculated on. But anytime there's a speculation created, that can be conceived as a bubble.
Didn't some economists, even the great Milton Friedman himself, suggest that the Fed should actually do little things to sort of encourage bubbles so that everything would go up and everybody could get richer?
Well, Friedman, yes.
You know, when I read that Friedman did that, I was astounded. Because I went to college being an admirer of his and him almost being a hero of mine.
Yeah, no, and to be candid, he's usually pretty clear on the rules of economic establishment. But the fact of the matter is that the Fed is, if you imagine it this way, you have water coming down a mountain. That is the natural market. Right. Anytime a boulder is placed, the market will find its way around it. The market moves around it in any way it possibly can. So when the Fed infuses itself into any kind of a system, it will change the nature of the pure market.
What does the Fed do to create bubbles?
Well, the way in which the Fed can do it is it can distribute more cash. It is the first source of cash distribution into the economy, monetizing things.
Right.
Secondly, it can change the reserve requirements. Banks can increase or decrease the amount they have to hold on loan.
If it decreases the reserve requirements,
banks have more money to get out there, so that can create more cash in the economy.
Right.
And then it can also influence the buying and selling of bonds. A bond cannot be taken to a grocery store and sold and used. Right. You have to have cash. So if they put bonds out there and pull cash out of the economy, they slow down the economy. So it manipulates the movement of this river.
How do we recognize a bubble when it's going to happen?
You can recognize it generally by speculation. You start to see things increasing without an underlying foundation for it. There was a bubble that occurred in petroleum just a year or so ago.
Right.
That was where speculation started to increase, and the underlying components were not there. So with that, we've seen, you've identified it, bubble in the 1980s, where we were dealing with everybody's buying IBM and Apple and everything else.
Right.
Bursts, 1987. You have a bubble that comes along with the dot-coms.
Right.
Bursts in 99, 2000. You have a bubble that comes along in 2007. But the difference today from any other bubble, starting with the housing bubble, is that the government, the Fed, they're not just the boulder. They're not the regulator. They're now in there throwing punches. They're the player.
All right. What makes a bubble burst?
Usually,
and what happens when it bursts?
Well, you get to a point in time where its underlying components are not sustainable. Let me give you the example that we have right now. You have right now free debt. That's been created by the Fed.
Okay.
I can go borrow as much money as I want for zero if the federal government or other institutions, because it's free.
Right.
If we have any inflation rate, it's negative.
When you say free, you mean the interest rate is next to zero or zero?
Next to zero.
Okay.
I take that money, I go to Europe, and I invest it. Let's just say I put it into a bank account over there. That bank account is paying 5%. That's called the carry trade. I have created wealth from nothing. That creates value in that, which grows until what? The underlying component, the interest rate,
right,
starts to shift.
Right.
That will burst the bubble.
Okay.
That's the pin.
And the reason you can borrow that money at zero is because that's the number that the Fed has declared.
That's right.
That's not the fair market value of the money.
Not. Or I couldn't get it at 5% in Europe.
Exactly. Why is it that the Fed will not allow banks to loan money at the fair market value of the money. As I understand it, there's only two ways that banks can acquire money to be lent, either because people save money and the banks have it to save it, or because the government puts it in there and orders them to loan it at a certain rate.
You're absolutely right. And there's two quick answers to that. One, the Fed and the government are now in partnership. We have not seen that in such a collusive fashion as we have now. They're now lending money to the federal government.
Right.
And to do that now, they're saying it has to be low enough for the federal government to get it. It can't charge banks a different number than it charges the federal government.
We were talking about this in the break, and before I let you go, earlier this week in China, the president was dropping hints that there may be another recession on the way. Does he know something we don't know, or is he trying to cover something?
My view, economically, he wants another stimulus package.
So he scares us.
It scares us, but he's recognizing that everything you've been saying about this fabrication, the asset bubbles getting bigger, it's going to pop. The president is preempting it and saying we probably need to fix it before it happens. How does he fix it? More government intervention, larger boulders in the water, again, going against it.
The next time you're here, we'll talk about what we can do about it. Professor David Bruckner, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.